all the Wednesday to order. I'm going to change up a bit of the agenda where our cases will be moved last, and I would like to first kick off the meeting by introducing our newest commissioner, Nathan. And Nathan is a product of former Chairman Dodd Galbraith's work with council to restructure a bit of this commission to introduce a registered landscape architect in one of our seats, which is highly valued. So I'd like for Nathan to give a little introduction about his background and welcome him here to the commission.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nathan Oliver. As Kabir mentioned, I am a landscape architect, been practicing here in Nashville for the past 13 years, I guess. My background's in plant sciences, and then moved on to landscape architecture, studied urban planning as well. So kind of brings all of the aspects of kind of what we do from development and our natural kind of landscapes together. So looking forward to bringing that here as a part of this board and kind of bring the diversity and kind of strengthen it as well with the rest of the commissioners. So I've been before the commission before. I've been a part of a number of stormwater projects and studies and worked in the city for a number of years. So looking forward to serving, and thank you for having me.
And I will add and attest that Nathan is one heck of a soccer player. His team absolutely taught my team a lesson on Saturday. So he does have skills in other arenas. And I didn't introduce myself. My name is Kabir Sandhu, for those of you that are new in the audience. So looking forward to this meeting. So second order of business is let's go ahead and, do we have a quorum to take care of we don't have a quorum for our minutes because Nathan. So we'll move minutes to we can go ahead and do that? Okay, all right. We'll go ahead and review last meeting's minutes and decision letters. It's customary for us to review this in the public arena. I want to give the commissioners a couple minutes to take a moment and review those.
And just to confirm, there weren't any decision letters from last week, were there?
No, there were no decision letters from January. Just minutes. And I've also got the minutes, revised minutes from December and a revised decision letter for the Miami Avenue case.
And to confirm, Logan, the December meeting minutes and the decision letters that were amended, are those in our packet just so that we're aware that they were amended?
Yes, that's correct.
And so there's no vote today needed for those?
No, I don't think so. Just made aware because there was a misspelling on the Miami case, and then I think on the decision letter, there was also a misspelling as well.
All right, so then here's January minutes. Now we'll entertain a motion for approval or disapproval or any edits.
I would move to approve the January meeting minutes with one amendment. At the top, it says the meeting took place on January 7th, and I believe it took place on January 3rd, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
So I would move to approve with that one amendment.
That's a good catch. All right, we have a motion. We have a second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Unless Commissioner Fulmer's got a, did you find another?
Technical issue.
Okay, all right. Let's do that again then. We had a motion, we had a second, and all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Motion passes. Great. All right. Second item of business, if I may, introduce Mr. Josh Hayes with Metro Water Services to the desk or the podium here to give us an update on permitting and the annual report.
Hello, there we go. Thank you for allowing me to take a few moments here. As many of you know already, we have a permit here in Davidson County. We refer to it as our MS4 permit, which stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit. It's issued through the TDEC division, but it comes down from the EPA through the Clean Water Act permit provisions. But the permit requires us to manage all of our stormwater runoff here in Davidson County to make sure it's clean, not causing flooding issues before it drains into our streams and rivers. The permit in particular requires us to implement a lot of prescribed programs that we have to track throughout the year. And each year we have to submit an annual report to TDEC with various stats and information on what we did that previous year. There's a link to all of the annual reports that we've submitted over the last 15 years to TDEC at the bottom of that page. And the full report for this year. We just submitted our report for last fiscal year in December. So it's due every December. But TDEC likes for us to present a summary of information that we did the previous year to a public forum, which is why we're here today. But I'll be very brief. You can scroll on down. So first I want to just give you a few examples of kind of what we encountered over the previous years as far as pollution that we found and stopped. The first case here was our permit requires us to go around to commercial and industrial zoned areas during dry weather events and just basically proactively look for pollution. We call it dry weather field screening. We could have put a lot of different examples here, but this is just one of the examples of the issues that we found. While doing a dry weather field screening, we found a food processing plant. All the processing was done indoors, but they had dumpsters outside, and they had spilled a lot of the fats, oils, and grease outside, which was draining off their lot into our MS4 stormwater drainage system. So by finding this, we issued a violation and a penalty and required them to clean them up and implement practices going forward to make sure this doesn't happen again. You can scroll on down. This next one here was, we have a program in place. Matthew Lockhart, if you raise your hand, Matthew. He is over our inspection program for our stormwater control measures. So you guys are here reviewing cases involving our regulations. And we require sites to put in stormwater control measures, such as detention ponds, bioretention basins. All these structures have to be maintained by their property owners throughout the perpetuity of the life of the project or the property. So we go around years after they're signed off, make sure that the property owner, sometimes the third or fourth property owner, is maintaining that detention pond or bioretention basin. In this case, our inspectors were out inspecting a dry detention pond and found sewage draining into that pond. It turned out that sewage was coming from a failed grinder pump at a private apartment complex, so we're able to work with them to correct that issue and clean up all the material in the dry pond before it drained out into a stream. But that was just something that we found during our proactive routine inspections. This next one was, the next two actually, are reports that came to us from citizens. We have Hub Nashville, which you all know about. We receive hundreds of reports every year of potential pollution issues. This one came in and the report was cloudy water draining to a tributary to Richland Creek that drains through the McCabe Golf Course, if anybody's ever been there. This is a unique area. It's old. A lot of the system, over 900 acres of the system that drains to this tributary is piped underground. So when we get a call of pollution at this spot, it's really hard to track. But we spent several days going up the watershed, and we found an industrial site that had a large gravel parking lot that was discharging sediment during a rain event onto a railroad right away and into a storm drain. So we were able to work with TDEC, that site. All industrial sites that have exposed processes outside have to get permits through TDEC as well. We worked with TDEC to do a co-inspection of the site, issue a letter to them requiring them to issue or to implement a corrective action plan to prevent this pollution from draining off their lot in the future.
Can I ask a question about that one?
Yeah.
How far away was that lot from this?
It was, so we got the pollution call on the evening. That was a day after the rain event. So it took a whole day for that pollution to get down to this area of the golf course. So it's probably about 3/4 of a mile upstream through a pipe system. This area, for anybody that's familiar with the area, Murphy Road, there's a big old culverted pipe system, goes all the way up to 440. And then the surrounding neighborhoods are all piped that drain into this. So we had to go throughout that whole 100 acres and try to find the source of that. The next one, this was also reported by a citizen. This is over in Green Hills. Right before dark, they noticed cloudy water going into Sugar Tree Creek I think it's by the YMCA there. And we responded after hours. Were able to track it about. It was actually a permitted construction site, had a grading permit, and they were pumping a pit out without the filtered controls. So we issued a stop work order, required them to pay a fine and implement controls to prevent this from going forward in the future. Our MS4 permit requires us to also inspect industrial facilities. As I mentioned before, all these industrial facilities that have processes exposed outside, they have to get what's called a TMSP permit, Tennessee Multi-Sector Permit, from TDEC. And they have to implement a stormwater management plan, just like we do for the whole county. They have to control their sites. This is a site that we're inspecting. TDEC wants us to inspect these in the county. We're inspecting this. This is a waste transfer facility where they stage waste and then haul it off to a landfill out of the county later. They had no controls in place to prevent this trash, sludge, organic waste from draining down into a detention pond and eventually out to an outfall into a stream. While we were doing the inspection, we found this, reported it to TDEC, required the site to issue implement a corrective action plan, revisited the site, and they cleaned it all up and implemented new controls to prevent this from happening in the future. Another thing that we do for industrial facilities, we just started last year, there's probably several hundred facilities in the county that most of the stuff is indoors that they do. And they do not have to get a permit through TDEC. They can claim no exposure and get what's called a no exposure certification for it. It's all based on the honor system. They submit the form to TDEC saying they have no exposure. But what we have found over the years is that a lot of these sites do have exposed industrial processes that could cause pollution to drain off the site. So one of the things we did last year is we started going around and verifying these non-exposure certification areas to see if they did have any industrial processes exposed. And we were able to find about 12 facilities last year that we turned into TDEC that we believe have exposure to industrial processes and require them to get TDEC TMSP permits, which will hopefully require them to implement controls to prevent runoff in the future of pollution issues. Our permit also requires us to have a detailed public education component. We do a lot of different things through social media postings every week. We attend a lot of different events. One of the things I wanted to highlight from last year is we operated a rain barrel subsidy program where we offered Davidson County residents a subsidized rate of rain barrels. And by doing that, we sold about 945 rain barrels throughout the county. That will hopefully be implemented in yards to help reduce runoff from rooftops and whatnot to our stormwater system. We actually have a sale going on now. You can sign up. The event to pick it up is late March, but you have up until March 10th to sign up if you're a Davidson County resident to get a barrel at a subsidized rate. And as I mentioned, we attend a lot of events throughout the year. This is an example of an event where Rebecca Doan's staff, the urban forestry staff, attended the Lawn and Garden Show, and they gave out over 2,500 tree seedlings in the event. So we do a lot of public education events like that as well. And I'm not going to go through all these numbers. You guys got a copy of them. I think there's a couple of them I just want to point out. The street sweeping, the program that NDOT currently operates, they collected over 3,000 tons of debris from our roadways that would otherwise end up in our storm drains. So it's a very important program. Also, our stormwater maintenance department, they clean out inlets every day. They're out there right now cleaning out inlets. They cleaned out an estimated around 200,000 pounds of sediment from our storm drains that would otherwise end up in our streams. So that's really, I'm not going to bore you with all the other details. You guys got a copy. That's really just to give you kind of a highlight of our program. We got to do this each year, so we'll be back next year. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
How many back trucks do y'all have?
I think we have 3.
How many you need?
That would be a question for Tom Palco, Ricky Swift. Probably more. I can say that.
The question is, how many are operating at any given time?
Yeah, when they go down, maintenance is very expensive. I think each Vector truck costs over $500,000.
Mr. Hayes, this is great work. I really appreciate the case study examples. It's really eye-opening as to some of the work that you guys do and the amount of ground you cover. On this last page that we have, I really like these statistics. One of the things that helps me put things into perspective is having prior year's data. And if it's possible in our next report to see how these numbers compare to last year or maybe 2 or 3 years back, not to create more work for you all, but it'd be interesting to see how we're trending or how we're improving or how maybe things are getting worse.
Right.
That helps us here in this commission.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
any other comments or questions from the commissioners?
No, just thanks for the great work y'all are doing. I love the rain barrel program to help kind of distribute to residents.
If you know anybody interested, right now we have about 400, we can go up to 1,000. We have 400 already sold. So if you know anybody interested, just Google Nashville rain barrel sale. It'll come up. Okay.
Okay, very good.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your presentation. All right. I actually also missed, as I'm shaking up this agenda a bit, I missed that we have a council person in the audience today, Councilperson Ewing. Would you like to speak now, or are you here associated with a case? Okay, it's up to you then if you'd like to speak now or with that case. I think it will be first on the agenda. Okay. Okay, sure. Recognize Councilperson Ewing.
So first of all, I should say thank you for all that you do. I know that volunteering for a task like this is no big thing, no small thing, so thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to this. I heard about this, this petition for a variance, I think back in December. I have been to the site and viewed what was put in place in this gentleman's backyard. And with all due respect to my constituent, I would respectfully request that you deny this variance request. I have serious concerns. The grading of the site in the backyard looks to have been raised by, I don't know, it looks like maybe 2 feet. A lot of the I know that the pieces of the variance include permission to keep the putting green in place where there's artificial turf, to keep a structure that was put in floodway or buffer zone in place. And I think both of those would be detrimental to the area. There's a reason that this space was kept undeveloped. It is functioning wetland, basically, and to put structures in the way of natural processes, I think, is a mistake. It also sets a pretty bad precedent for this neighborhood. When I was canvassing around this area, when I was running for office, I heard a lot from various sections of Green Hills about localized flooding. It's an increasing problem in that area of our city. It's probably an increasing problem throughout the city, quite frankly. And I would put it to you who have greater expertise than I do about whether taking away the natural plant life that was in there and that exists in the rest of that zone in the backyards of neighboring properties. If taking that out and putting in artificial turf, despite the fact that it does allow for some water infiltration, I still do have concerns that there is less capacity for that area to absorb rainwater. And while the constituent does say that there has not been any negative impact in terms of flooding in the last year, I would argue that we should add the word yet. Just because there hasn't been an issue with flooding to date does not mean that there will not be. And I think we saw from the 2010 flood, which albeit was a somewhat extraordinary situation, that it is possible for flooding events to happen that we do not anticipate. It is the age of climate change. So that is what I came here to say. Thank you for hearing me out. And I will just stay for the remainder of the discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your thoughtful and detailed delivery of that. We'll certainly take that into consideration when we hear the case. Okay. Anything else before we get into cases? Okay. All right. While Logan is...
I'm sorry,
Go
Chair.
ahead.
Can you just confirm for the record that that was about case number 1?
Yes.
That's okay.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ewing gave a statement related to case number 2023-00017. The address is 3817 Trimble Road. Okay. I'd like for that applicant to go ahead and come to the front table here. And in the meantime, I would like to ask Logan to read the opening statement to the applicant.
If you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Stormwater Management Commission, you may appeal the decision by filing for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the Commission's decision. You are advised to seek the independent advice of legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been satisfied. Case number 1 on the agenda is case 2023-00017, 3817 Trimble Road, 3817 Trimble Road. APN is 13007010000. Inspector is Logan Bowman. Council District 34, Sandy Ewing. Applicant's request, allowance of an unpermitted structure to remain in the floodway of Belmead Branch. Allowance of disturbances to the stream buffer of Belmead Branch to remain. Continuous mowing and maintenance of portions of the stream buffer. Appellant is Jason R. Padgett, represented by Adam Seeger, P.E., Dell & Associates. Comments. Stormwater staff. Staff does not support Zone 1 buffer disturbances or violation of our floodplain management regulations. This particular case is the result of an enforcement action by MWS relating to parcel development work done that was not according to stormwater regulations and without the necessary permits. The unpermitted site work per initial evaluation involves floodway disturbances as well as floodplain cut and fill balance considerations. If a variance is not granted, staff will grant the parcel owner 30 days from the Stormwater Management Commission hearing date to submit a permit application to MWS that will serve to bring the site into compliance with stormwater code/regulations. Codes, no comment provided. Planning, deferred to the recommendation of the Stormwater Management Commission. Greenways, defer to recommendation of the Stormwater Management Commission.
Okay. Thank you for a thorough staff commentary on this case. Just so that folks in the audience also know how this will go down is applicant will have 10 minutes to present. I'll give a 2-minute warning. We will close the applicant hearing. We will open public hearing for comment. Anyone here to speak in favor or opposition of will have 2 minutes. And then we will close public hearing. Committee will deliberate, and we may have some questions back for the applicant. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and ask the applicant to introduce themselves that are all on the panel, and we'll start your case presentation.
Do I got it on? There we go. Thank you all. My name's Adam Sager. I'm with Dale and Associates, civil engineering firm here in town, and I represent the owner, Mr. Paget here. Mr. Paget called us up this past fall and said, yeah, I got a violation. I said, well, what's going on? He said, well, I wanted to build a pool in the backyard, and I asked Metro to come out and had some questions about how that was going to work. So he invited Metro, floodways and floodplains. It was just his backyard. And so a violation was sent. Mr. Paget complied. He has paid those violations, and then we are here before you because of that. As you can see in the picture and other subsequent pictures we've submitted, there's an outdoor living area. It has pavers, a putting green, a turf field. These are in the floodway and associated buffers. There's no getting around it. They absolutely were put in there. Those were put in a couple years ago. And so it came as quite a surprise to Mr. Paget whenever he was given a violation, because he doesn't understand how all of those systems work. I do think an important thing to note is that this specific property was granted a variance by this very board back in 2006, I think. The walls that you see, as many of the neighbors have walls along Richland Creek in this area, a variance was granted to allow the walls and the bridge to exist. So that was granted back in 2006. So the walls, everything, the structure, all of that stuff has already been granted a variance for this. So the new things you're seeing are going to be the putting green, the awning, fireplace, and then the turf field. I do want to note that the basketball court, there was some comments from a letter about lighting as well. The basketball court, the lighting, those are outside of the buffers. Those are not, part of this application or to be considered as part of floodway, floodplain. So we took a look at it. We did some engineering on it. First, when we look at floodway, floodplain, there's two kind of main criteria where at least I kind of put it in. There's going to be quantity, flooding, things like that, and then there's going to be quality, water quality buffers. So concerning the flooding of the property, we're talking about a pretty negligible area. One, it's a single family lot. Number two, we can't prove or disprove whether or not fill was placed there. We don't have any records of what was there before. If you look at the pictures we submitted, I don't know if you can pull those up. Everything looks to be at grade. The pavers may be raised a few inches or 6 inches or so. There's a step up to go onto the patio. If you scroll down, there's some pictures there of it. There you go. So that's standing at the house looking back across the wall, the bridge. And if you scroll down, you can kind of see everything's pretty much at grade. There's no big hills or mounds. And so, in my opinion, the flooding is a non-issue. And here's what I mean by that, okay? Because all items are at grade, and items that occupy volume would be negligible in any flooding model. So if anybody's ever done flood modeling, this level of changes in a flood model on Richland Creek doesn't move the needle at all. It's when we see pretty much significant grading is when you're going to see changes or an accumulation effect, which I'll get to in a minute. So I don't think that what is there today is going to adversely affect flooding at all. The turf that was installed, kind of getting on to the water quality component of it, you can't deny that there's impervious surface there with that roof right there. But the turf that was installed, that actually will absorb more than what the ground was there previously. If you were to say, hey, we want to take existing ground and we wanted to implement a best management practice, and we want to promote infiltration, something like this, we look at it differently, but something like this would be proposed. What I mean by that is we think of rain gardens, we think of pavers. Those items are made to infiltrate water. And the turf field that was installed was rated as 60 inches per hour. For anybody who designs these systems, the infiltration rate to propose these systems in Metro is a ½ inch per hour to find an infiltration rate. So this is much more infiltrative than probably what the existing ground was. Underneath all of the turf is a layer of gravel to promote groundwater infiltration. And so I think you'll find that the infiltration is a lot more on something like this than it would have been if it was just a field or something, or a yard or something like that. So really, we got this case, and normally we're asking about things that we are going to do, that a developer's going to do, that a community's going to do. In this case, it's something that's already been done in the past, and we're asked to allow it to stay there because a neighbor didn't know any better. I mean, that's kind of really what our case is Mr. Paget doesn't know these systems. He installed a backyard, he installed a putting green, this stuff for his kids, for family, for hanging out. And we have complied. We didn't know any better. We asked that it stays in place. One final thing I was thinking about, and it's not part of the package, but I printed out some exhibits. Is that okay if I bring that up?
Yes.
I've got plenty if you guys just want to pass it around. And how am I doing on time? Am I okay? Okay.
You have about 4 minutes.
Okay. I've been before this board. I've been before many boards. And we have to stay focused on this case. So one argument we can make is you have to consider what's in front of you. And I understand that. We're not going to the left or to the right. You consider the case in front of you. And there's some merit to that, and I understand that. But in the same argument, we're talking about something that's already been done. And we're talking about stormwater systems on a very, very, very small scale that even this board has said previously, but if we let everybody do it, it accumulates, and the accumulation is what causes a adverse negative effect on floodway, floodplain, and things like that. So in a sense, it kind of is part of the whole ecosystem of all of the neighbors up and down the creek. And then even the council member said something I was going to mention, which is precedent. And I got to thinking, it's kind of an interesting precedent. If we were to consider all of the neighbors in an accumulating effect, why is this one singled out versus the others? It wasn't very hard to go up and down this particular creek or any creek in Nashville and to look in everybody's backyard and find fire pits, to find sheds, to find playgrounds, to find all manner of things that do require a variance from this board to exist. Why is this one here, but for a neighbor who asked permission from Metro to do something for a pool, and then he's the one who is being dinged for it? So I do think in this case, because it's something that's already been done, not something we're asking to do in the future, I do think that that's relevant. And so it's for that reason we ask that you grant the variance, allow it to exist. We apologize. Mr. Paget will apologize for putting it in there. He didn't know any better. He's paid the fines. He's complied. And so, yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll hold my time. Mr. Paget, did you want to say anything?
Like Adam said, I did not know. It's not like I snuck around and thought, ooh, I'm going to hurry up and do this before Metro gets involved. None of that. I mean, somebody had asked me after I had done it, who did you get to build it? Well, I like tinkering around and doing this and that, so I actually was the one who built it. I didn't hire a contractor to build this open air structure. Yeah.
1 minute.
So I guess what I'm saying is like he said, I wasn't trying to get around the rules. I will say Since that's been there, there has been no puddle, no standing water. That turf field right there absorbs, and Logan was out at my house at one point, and he was asking about the filter, or the drainage of that turf as a concern. Well, we went out there, we got a 5-gallon bucket of water and dumped it on that, and it disappeared instantly. I think Logan might even admit that he was surprised how well that drained. It drains better now. I've lived there since 2009. I've lived through the 2010 flood, and it drains better now. My property drains better. And when I say drains, I'm not saying drains onto neighboring properties. And one of my neighbors is here, he can attest to that. But it drains better now than before because it was muddy. It just wouldn't drain. Water would rush down, it would puddle. Now there's none of that. So I ask that y'all, like Adam said, just understand that I didn't do anything on purpose to deceive the board, to deceive Metro Water, and I think it has improved, especially with those walls that we have on our particular property from a flooding standpoint.
Thank you. Okay, that's time. I'll open the floor up for public comment. Is there anybody here in support of or opposition? And at this time, I'd like for you to come to the podium and state your case, if so. See, we have one. And if you don't mind, provide your name and your address for the record.
Good morning. My name is Justin Hampton. I live at 3819 Tribble. So if you're looking at Jason's property, I am the neighbor directly to the right. I'm not here on behalf of a discussion of the stormwater. I'm here on behalf of, I think there's been some neighbor comments against the sport court, or possibly against the open air structure. My wife and I and family, we're for Jason and his structure. All I see every afternoon or evening or weekends is a dad with 3 children that are out enjoying the outside with his family. And if it's not Jason and his family, it's normally Jason and his friends and their kids' friends. So we have no opposition to the structure. And Jason has always been courteous from the standpoint of lighting, never after hours. It's never a party. It's all about family. So thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else here? Okay, seeing none. Logan, have we received any, I think we have some letters of opposition and maybe some support?
Yes, there were multiple letters in opposition. And I can read the names of and the addresses. We got one from Miss Betsy Hay at 3808 Harding Place. Shanna Bellot and Anthony Bellot, who live at 3811 Trimble. There's, sorry, let me find Steve Ray. Where's that one? He lives at 3809 Trimble. And then Ripley Bickerstaff lives at 3813 Trimble. So all of the individuals who complained and have opposition are upstream of Mr. Patchett, and it sounds like the neighbor who was here is downstream. There are multiple videos. I don't know if we want to pull up any of those videos or if we have the ability to. All the videos that I've seen are taken from either the 2010 flood or February of 2022, which was another large rainstorm event. So I guess if anybody would like to see those, let us know.
I know a link was provided to the commissioners in the email with access to the videos. Do we need to see those? Okay, here in this meeting. All right. Okay, I'll close public hearing and open it up for discussion. I guess I can also start off some of that discussion. I think there's a few factors in play here. The factor I did not have information on was the 2006 variance that was issued?
Correct. So there was the house was built in 2005. At that time, I believe the builder pulled a permit through the state to construct the bridge and put the walls in, but they did not pull a permit through Metro Water. So they also received a violation for putting the walls in and maybe doing some filling on the property and also building the bridge. But they came before the board in May of 2006, and they got approval to leave those structures in place.
Were the structures part of, the structures that are in question today that are in the floodway a part of that?
No, that was just for the bridge and the walls along the creek, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then at that time, I believe the buffer requirements were 25 feet from the stream, so now it's 75-foot buffer from the floodway. This area was mapped into the floodway in 2017 with the remapping through FEMA for the first time, I believe. So there was no floodway at that time. It was just a stream buffer.
Okay. Was the grading of the portion south of the stream a part of that original variance?
I believe there was some grading, and just speaking to Michael Hunt, in the documentation we could find, it was potentially graded up to the top of the wall at that point. And so part of the discussion at the Stormwater Committee was to pull the grade back down to the original grade. So that's what they've done. So the grade at the wall now still matches where it was in 2006. It seems pretty evident that that's clear. Even now on this property, on both sides, the grade matches at the wall. The concern is the grade as you go farther into the property and the turf portion. It's not clear exactly, but it could potentially have been raised a couple feet where the turf is.
So when we think about the timeline and like the property, the house was built in 2005, there was a state permit granted. And then after the fact of building the walls and the bridge, it came before Metro in 2006. So it was a retroactive variance.
That's my understanding, yes. There's a original variance package, and I think that has a notice of violation from MPDES.
Yeah, it does. I just read it.
Yeah.
So essentially, this property continues to do things without
different owners.
Different owners,
yes,
but over and over, it's requesting variance in retrospect. I will say, just thinking, one thing we look at is hardship, and I mean, you all know this, and I guess I stick to this, but the hardship, I hate to think about, and precedent has been brought up more than once, but my concern is, precedent is not doing your due diligence and then asking forgiveness, because if we approve this, then how many property owners across the county are going to say, oh, I didn't know because I did the work myself, and therefore now you have to give me an approval because I didn't know why I did it. And I have a real concern about that because I don't see an argument for hardship here other than, unfortunately, just lack of understanding and knowledge or willingness to put forth the effort to understand what was needed on behalf of the applicant to follow the appropriate processes.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. And that's part of the reason why I brought that before you is that precedent. If the precedent is that people can just go do what they want, right? But that's why I brought up this, and I used to live on a stream in Nashville. And I can tell you my neighbor had a big fire pit and a pizza kitchen and that kind of stuff. And that's why I brought that along. I would think that if the precedent is that we're going to go onto people's properties and take pictures and bring them before this board for things that were done in the past, then why is it not being done to every member along this street or all over Nashville? In other words, what precedent does that set but to tell people, hey, do it and don't ask Metro over, or else you're going to appear before this board. You see what I mean? I don't disagree with you. It's a tricky part because Mr. Paget comes to me and says, I didn't know any better. I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, I know. And if he never called Metro out, I don't think we'd be here. And so it was clearly an act of ignorance. And then the word precedent keeps coming up in my mind. It's like, well, if we're here on this one, why aren't we here on all of them?
My understanding is from your argument that the applicant may believe that the application of the rules and regulations may be unfair, but what we have to look at today in front of this board is the case and the variance that's been brought in front of us. I'm somewhat new to this commission. I understand the situation that you're in, and I do have, I understand the applicant, and to be honest, I was very impressed with your handiwork and the skills, but as a commissioner, I am reviewing this case as if you were presenting this new plan in front of me. My personal opinion is the fact that the construction has been done to date is not going to affect the way that I would rule in this particular case. I understand there are many rules, regulations, and ordinance that Metro Nashville has, and I understand it's very difficult for many, even attorneys, to understand all those rules and regulations, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't apply and that the rules are not going to be enforced against them. So I just want to let you know that I understand the argument that you're making, but as a commissioner, I'm looking at this case as if you were presenting this to me. Based on what my fellow commissioners said, you can't claim a hardship after the fact of breaching a rule or ordinance and regulation. So I just wanted to give you my perspective on that.
So what I heard is the walls make this a different kind of, just completely different scenario in my mind, because we're all about sponginess, buffers, water getting to the creek bed, and getting the water in the ground. The walls provide a barrier. And what he said is his backyard was muddy, wasn't draining. So if somebody's got a muddy backyard and you can't fill it because it's floodplain, what's the only solution? Is change it to turf. You know, strip it down, put gravel down, and put a surface that the water gets underground. And so that's where I struggle, because, you know, the hardship is really you can't fill the floodplain, and you also can't have a mud pit. So that I think that's one thing that we need to consider. You know, the volume that the stone provides is significant, because no turf installer is going to put this in without 4 to 6 inches of stone under it. So that makes me like the turf. But anyway, continue hearing what everybody else thinks.
I think we're going to have to take this component by component in a way. Rebecca, do we have any, can you pull up the aerial of 2010 for this site? May be helpful to turn on, okay. Yeah.
There's a lot of areas of town where it already receded when they took the pictures, so unless you're on the Cumberland or the Harpeth, it's probably not going to show much, but.
Mm-hmm. It just shows that all the neighbors have cleared that whole area.
Were there trees taken down as a part of this construction, this project?
Not within that setback.
Okay.
Look back towards where the sport court is, yes. And obviously you can't see them because of the coverage there with the trees, but grass did not grow very well back then, especially as you got towards the creek. It was, like he was just saying, it was just mud, it was puddles, it was, sorry, I didn't have that on, but it was just a mess. I mean, and it didn't drain at all, so I'm telling you, I've lived there since 2009, and the drainage on our property is much better, and not to the expense of our neighbors to the left or right either. It just drains better. It's actually, I guess, filtered because of the turf. It goes down. They did pipes and drainage stuff so that it drains into a drain and goes into the creek. if y'all were out there, I think you would agree, if you were out there now versus 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that it is a much better, once you're there, seeing that it drains better, it has no adverse, and the walls that are there, there's no excess water that goes in that's contaminated or anything like that. Those walls do make it different than what you think of most houses that have a creek and that maybe we're pushing dirty water into. If there's a precedent, I mean, the walls, I think, maybe are an exception to allow a precedent so that it's not set in a negative way moving forward. The fact that we've got those walls and that they were there legally and that it makes it a little bit of a different situation, in my opinion.
I think focusing on the turf for this instance, because I think there's a couple things that we're talking about, but focusing on the turf, the thing that, for me, that makes this a little unique and more challenging is that if you were coming in and saying, this is what we'd like to do, this is our existing condition, this is what our grades are at now, this is what what we'd like to adjust them to, this is what we're gonna mitigate for removing whatever vegetation may be there. It allows a little bit of understanding of what you're changing. I think the challenging thing right now is we don't know what those were. We don't know how much it's changed. The imperviousness, I think, that was noted could be a good thing, but we don't know what the other effects are. And I think that makes it a little bit challenging to really understand what the effects may be and whether there hasn't been anything to date. I think it doesn't mean there won't ever be anything because of what has been done, and I think it makes it a little bit more difficult to understand.
When was the turf installed?
I'm going to say 2 years ago, 18 months ago. And there's been some pretty heavy rains.
Do you have the picture, Rebecca, of the backyard that shows how it connects to the side?
This is imagery from 2018. Is that what you're? I'm sorry, Joe.
Yeah, there was a picture that showed the perimeter of the turf.
Oh, a picture
in
that
relationship
In
to
the application.
got
to
it.
the native grass.
And while we're on that topic, can you describe again? You said the turf has an underdrain system that routes the water where?
Routes it. If you see right there with the creek, you see that little brick. Yes, right there. That's the way that it initially, I didn't install those. Those were already there. But they weren't near as useful. Now they're actually used, and there's not a crazy amount of water because most of the water seeps through. Again, Logan saw me pour a 5-gallon bucket, and it drains down. It doesn't spill over on the neighbor's yard. But if there is any, then it does go, it's got pipes from the sport court. It drains to the edges and in a drain. I mean, it's a very well thought out.
Is there a liner underneath? Is it like liner, then gravel, then
it goes
underdrain?
down into the earth. There's no liner.
Rebecca, I saw one picture that I had, again, we don't have survey information, but he said he scraped the ground away. I did see one picture where there was gravel being spread, and so there is a layer of gravel under the turf that goes directly on the ground underneath.
Okay.
So it goes through turf, gravel, dirt.
And then underdrains in the gravel.
Yes. And there was no infill brought in. When we were talking earlier about how it was raised a little bit in a few areas, that was taken from where we cut in from the back where the sport court was. So there was no extra infill brought in at all.
I feel like it would be beneficial if we had more information as if this was a new site, like my fellow commissioner mentioned, and kind of laying out what the situation was beforehand, where these drains are, what the accumulation area is, and what the areas are quantified for the turf and estimates of how much infiltration versus how much impervious area is there. I feel like that would help us better understand, as if this was a new plan being presented, that we could actually have numbers to better understand the situation, what mitigation has been done for the area affected, those things.
I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know how we can recreate pre-existing conditions. I don't think anybody can. So We're taking pictures, survey of what's there today, moving forward, using best engineering judgment about what happened. You can see in one of the pictures you just brought up, there is a swath of existing land on either edge that still exists that is not turf. We can't, I think it might even be in the drawing of how many square feet is turf within the buffer area. And then we can get you an area of the impervious of the patio and the awning. So we can do some of those things. Can you zoom in there? I think we labeled it on that drawing right there. If that would help. Synthetic turf, where'd you say, Robert?
They did a calculation up top, on the top right.
On the top right,
Non-permeable.
right there. So does that help?
Well, one of the things we typically rule on is looking at, kind of no negative impact. So considering, how much of the buffer zone is impacted versus what mitigation is being put in.
Sure, the mitigation we're proposing is in the form of plantings. I don't think we can do any better on infiltration. In other words, if we were to propose a rain garden, our models won't show it infiltrating any better than what the turf already is. So the turf kind of acts as its own infiltration mitigation if you're just looking at infiltration practices. As far as quality goes, as part of this package, Hebert Ball did a landscape plan, and we're going to be planting several more trees in the area to try to help offset that.
I'd be curious when we talk about the infiltration to know, and I don't know if there's a way to quantify this, but how much of it is actually infiltrating into the soil versus getting into the under drain and dumping into the stream, right? Because if we're saying it's like a bioretention or a rain garden or something, we would be required to test those soils beneath and confirm that they actually have the capacity to take on that amount of water. So potentially just getting into that stream faster. I mean, it's probably getting down there, getting into the under drain, dumping, and then to Jay's point, I mean, there's definitely some storage that's happening above that in the stone.
One thing that could promote it, the existing grass, it doesn't change the overall infiltration greatly, except for those under drains, but it helps store the water before it goes in. You could maybe run a test on the sides where there's still grass, and then you could drop some sort of outlet control structure.
For sure, yeah, right.
That creates the ponding behind it and then overtops before it goes up.
Which would start to control how much it's getting into
then all of a sudden you added a detention system that greatly helps.
Because I think that's like the main difference, right, is that if we're calling this like a detention system or a storage system, there's no outlet control on it, so it's potentially just dumping faster. In like the smaller storms at least, but.
I went ahead and put up our artificial turf policy. This is a policy for turf not in a buffer. We do not allow turf in buffers, but we do treat it like permeable pavement only if it meets the cross-section of permeable pavement, because that's kind of how it functions. And we hired a consulting firm to do a study on different policies across the country. I think for a level 1 design, you would need at least 8 inches of media, which I don't know what the cross-section of yours is. But if that's helpful, that's kind of how we consider it is permeable pavement. And we like our buffers to be spongy with trees and grasses and bushes and stuff like that promote infiltration, not have under drains that take the water away.
There's less water, I can tell you for sure, that comes through those pipes. I mean, that comes out in those little outlets into the creek. There's less water now that goes into the creek than there was before.
We've got to be able to objectively determine that. So was a perk test performed on the site?
No, sir, when we showed up, the turf's installed.
Yeah, but on the adjacent sides where there's no
we have
turf?
not ordered infiltration tests, no.
Okay. I mean, this is a stream bank to begin with. It's alluvial soil. It's going to be highly permeable to begin with, but it'd be good to quantify what value it does have. I think we're slowly marching our way through some of the components. The components are the turf in the buffer, the structure in the floodway, the disturbance of Zone 1. So let's continue to maybe take these in a methodological manner. I do have a question about the covered patio. Was a building permit required to cover that open air patio?
There will be a building permit required for the pavilion, you're talking?
For the pavilion.
Yes. They don't have a building permit yet, but the building permit would be required to build that structure.
For the covered patio?
Yeah, well, it's more like open air pavilion, like I don't know what the word is exactly for it, but an awning, yeah. I mean, it's got posts down.
Yeah, in one of the pictures you can see from the side, it's open on 3 sides with just some boards on the back.
And part of our discussion with the applicant was that you can't build structures within the floodway. And so, 1564-170 says no structures are allowed in the floodway unless they meet certain criteria. So I think perhaps the applicant's stating that this is an athletic structure, which is allowed by code to be within the floodway.
I will tell you, one of the variance considerations that we have to look at is the danger that materials may be swept by floodwaters or streams onto land of others. And I'm not as familiar whether we've had 100 and 500 year flood events since, this has been installed. Do you know that?
I was there in 2010, which that obviously wasn't there. And that is the only time water has come out, even in the heaviest floods that we've had. Outside of that, it's never come out of those walls. So again, even in the heaviest, outside of 2010, that right there would affect no floodwaters from adjacent properties coming downstream.
I will say, in my experience, Metro Nashville is very different today than it was in 2010, and there's been a lot more building in these neighborhoods with more, more surface area that I think could affect. So I understand we always are looking back at 2010, but I think we live in a different reality now in Metro Nashville. But I have a lot of concerns. One, this is in the floodway itself, in the current maps that we're looking at. And I do think that and I believe there's a trampoline in our Zone 1 buffer as a part of this. If there is a flood, it could cause things to be going downstream onto neighboring properties and could cause harm or injury to others. Something to consider.
Where does the patio that we're looking at in the image and the structure drain to today?
I'm sorry, where
does the water that falls on those surfaces drain to today?
So you can't see it, but behind that, there's a ditch, but on that back wall, there's a ditch where floodwaters come from other properties that go back there. It never comes out of it at all, because it's behind there even further. That's where the floodwater comes in on other 2 and 3 properties down, not right here. So it doesn't.
Let me try, if you can go to our drawing, the civil drawing, the black and white.
But there is a drain, real quick, there is a drain, right, you couldn't see in that picture, in the pavers where the water goes down in and into the creek. From the pavers, there's a drain like this that it goes in.
So the little yellow hatched area is going to represent the awning, and the awning is pitched back towards the existing area. That little gap, that vertical gap you see behind the awning is natural, as was, and so it just falls into there, migrates around the wall. If you look at the patio, that's gonna, on your screen, it's gonna migrate to the left and stays behind the wall, gets in the under drains, the turf, and then comes out that brick opening that was already in the wall.
But the paver area has a drain within it that goes straight into the creek.
It's never even been a puddle there. Never like a flood of water.
One,
It's hard for
one
you.
other, one other observation is looking at the landscape plan that was submitted and looking at the aerial that was before us a little bit ago is, it looks as though there were a number of trees in this buffer space before the turf. Is that right? If you can pull that
not
aerial back
of
up.
any substance. Where you're talking about where the
Kind of
now back again back
between
where
that
the
green line. Yes.
where the sport court and the turf was, which outside of the buffer, we did take some trees. Yes, right there.
And so again, if
But
we were
you
looking-
can see I left that tree and
Yeah,
built around that.
Yeah, and again, I think we have to look at it as if this were a process that we're seeking an application to do this, I think there would be an inventory of the trees that were there and what was being removed, and then a mitigation plan that was
Which I'm
mitigating
willing.
for those effects. I think the mitigation plan for the landscape that we're seeing as a part of the application doesn't really reflect that very well in terms of, I think, the opportunity within that buffer to stabilize. And I understand the area was moist and held water and those sorts of things, and that could be because it just didn't have as quick of a way out as it does now, and those trees were providing, and that landscape was providing kind of a natural process of kind of dealing with that water. And if it's going away quicker now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going into the ground as fast, if you follow me, as it may just be getting to that space. And so providing opportunities to create or mitigate the sponginess that was lost, I think, is important for this, depending on where it goes. But I do like the idea that you put forward, that I think more information and a little bit more thorough of an application of pre and post would be helpful in kind of evaluating what that would be.
I'm fully willing to plant trees around the sides and all that where we can do that, if that helps mitigation.
Well, I will just say, and we'll eventually take a vote, or you might want to defer based off of what you're hearing from the commission, but I am not inclined to, for my vote, to allow structures, especially new impervious pavement, to be in a floodway and in the Zone 1 buffer, especially in this area, looking at the flood maps and the 100 and 500-year flood map. So what I don't want is to send the applicant on a wild goose chase, so I wanted to be very clear with where I am leaning right now, because I don't want you to go out, spend additional money. So I just wanted to make that clear. That is where I'm leaning at this point, as we're talking about the different parts of your variance request. And one other thing I would want to say about that, one of the considerations we look at is whether there was other existing areas on this property where you could have done this, this type of build. And there are areas in the property that were outside of the Zone 1 and Zone 2 buffer. So that's something that I would consider. I know that you've put, a basketball court in that area now, so it may not be usable for what you would like to use, for the barbecue space and covered area. But that's another thing that I would have considered if you were bringing this application to me prior to the work being done.
I mean,
We're having a dialogue in between. I don't want to get away from pulling back and forth to draw this out. But I do appreciate your responses. I think we're slowly heading towards a motion here, but I want to make sure that we handle each of these components maybe specifically in this motion. It may not be all one clean approval or denial in some ways. So I have a question for legal, Ms. Tara. From legal's perspective, for non-permitted structures, number one, I need some reassurance that this pavilion did in fact require a building permit.
I can confirm that it did require a building permit. That was one of the things that we checked off, and I've spoken directly to the zoning administrator.
Okay, thank you. What is the normal course of action for non-permitted structures?
I'm not sure what you mean. What do you mean by the normal course of action? Like,
When-
how do we enforce that?
When Metro determines that the structure should have been permitted, what is the action that happens thereafter?
Well, it depends, right? This is a different situation because it's being handled by water. It'd be a different situation if it was a codes violation and it was being handled by codes. For this particular one, it comes before your body because of where it's located. If it had been discovered by the zoning administrator, we still could have taken this individual to environmental court and have them bring the structure down. There's just different avenues to proceed, and that same avenue might be explored here as well. If you were to vote against this and say these structures have to come out, and then he didn't comply, then that would sort of track the same avenue that it would if it were an enforcement by a zoning administrator.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to make sure of, is that there's not additional action required by Metro codes, meaning, let me give you one scenario. Hypothetically, if the structure is approved to remain here in this committee, but it's an unpermitted structure, and now this is in the file from zoning and Metro codes, they may require him to remove it. So I want to make sure that we're in line and sync with.
Right, Logan
our
and
two
I can
bodies.
speak to the zoning administrator, but what I will say is I know nothing about the structure, nor do you, as far as and we don't need to get into this, but if he were to ever come back and pull any permits, which I think he knows now that he would have to pull a permit, and he wanted to add something to the structure, and the structure was deficient in any way, they wouldn't give him a permit until he brought it up to code. So if you say okay today, we can relay that to the zoning administrator, but if there was ever any subsequent action where he tried to pull a permit, all of those deficiencies, if there are deficiencies, would be caught, and then it would have to come compliant with code at that time. Now, I don't know how it sits there today, but I can speak to the zoning administrator should you decide that the structure will remain.
Okay, thank you.
What is that in the picture? What's that in the picture that looks like gravel and a deer stand?
I think similar to my fellow council member here, Commissioner, I'm just struggling with the hardship piece on this. And really understanding, other than just saying, I didn't know, I don't think that quantifies as hardship as we have to interpret hardship for these cases. And that is one of the real challenges for me, because when we do grant a variance, there has to be hardship, and we also grant variances because, the effort to mitigate the impacts has been, more than enough usually. And without, prior condition, and it looks like there is some space on the edges that's not turf where you could do a perk test and infiltration analysis to look at, even an estimate of what the prior conditions were, because it looks like there's a strip of grass on the perimeters that could serve as kind of a foundational understanding of what the prior consideration was. But I'm also a person that advocates for not building in the flood zone, and, we're seeing, more intense storm events, and 2010 is not necessarily the baseline across the county. And that's concerning we have to not just look at the past, but also think about the future and the future impacts as we see more intense storm events. So I guess my concerns are that there's not enough here to really say yes to this. And without additional information, there's no way I can approve.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna go back to the walls. I feel like that makes this a different situation. I don't know.
We've got to be able to objectively, it's easy to say it makes it better or that it flows better, it looks better, but we can't use that. Was a rise test done? There wasn't a rise test done in the stream or anything, right?
A no rise?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, no. I mean, this
Right.
is so small, it wouldn't, you hardly can't model something like this. I mean, you can do express tools and things like that. But even then, I can tell you it's going to be negligible. It falls into the .000. It won't move the needle, is kind of how I put it.
The other thing I want to make sure that when we say precedent, how we've handled channelized stream buffer disturbances before. We've done some of that in Sugar Creek recently, a few months ago, or last year. And we have handled channelized streams a little bit differently. I'm not saying it's going to make an approval for the current arrangement, but it may dictate how we provide guidance and what needs to be done as part of this potential motion.
Yeah, I'm personally not super concerned with like the flooding and whatever, because I agree that it's probably not going to move the needle like what they've done. But what I do struggle a lot with is the hardship, because if we say that this is like that I didn't know is a hardship, then what, exactly to their point of the neighbors have all this stuff. So what prevents a neighbor from coming to us and saying, well, they used the hardship of I didn't know, well, I didn't know either. So now y'all need to grant me this variance. And then it starts to snowball on us a little bit. So I really struggle with the hardship. And I don't necessarily think that there was enough effort put into the plan that's coming to us to show that, hey, we made this mistake, but here's how we're going to try to correct it. Like maybe we're going to try to remove a portion of it and we're going to give you something back. I would like to see, them come back with more of a compromise and saying like, we are sorry and this is what we're going to do to show that. And maybe it's not going back to the way that it would have been in the existing condition, but maybe a little bit more effort to come to some compromise on it.
The thing I like most about our board is we always give an opportunity to defer, whereas at BZA, once it's closed, you're kind of up a creek. Do y'all want to defer,
Yeah,
or do you want to send
I'm
this to a
absorbing
vote?
everything y'all are saying. And I'm hearing infiltration testing, compromise, things like that. I agree with everything y'all are saying. I mean, this is one that we've been put on, and the word precedent keeps coming up. It's like, well, yeah, but what about the other guy upstream? I mean, we looked at some of them, and there were some pools that were built in 2020, 2021 in the floodway. I don't know if those were brought before this board or not. I can't answer that. And I'm not here to pick on other neighbors. It's just to try to take it all in context, because what we're talking about here is one part of the whole. And I think it's hard to separate those in this case. This isn't a singular development where you have one specific thing controlling a lot of floodplain. This is one part of the whole, and we're trying to assess one house when everybody else up and down the creek also has, I mean, you can just go on the aerial, clear walls, bridges, rooftops, pools. And so we're wanting to not remove any of it, obviously. I mean, he didn't spend all the time and money to just go rip it out again. And so our first try is not to go rip things out. It's to analyze, realize the turf does provide a benefit, provide plantings where we can. We did not think about doing an infiltration test. I think that's a good idea. Commissioner Fulmer brought up maybe an outlet control structure. We can look at doing something like that. And so we can certainly defer and come back with a little more information and in consideration of what you all have said.
And I think if that is what you choose to do, and you come back to the board, based off the discussion on the exceptional hardship, I think that your mitigation efforts will need to be, I would highlight that if you were going to be bringing another plan before this.
Yeah,
board,
you guys bring up hardship. I feel like that's a hard one for me to talk to because it's already been done. The hardship is he's a neighbor like every other neighbor in Nashville that goes in his backyard and builds something for his kids. I mean, I don't know how to prove a hardship on that. You know what I mean? That's a difficult one.
Well, let me just remind the board that that's a prerequisite that you have to determine, and it has to be an exceptional hardship. So what you have before you is this property. It's not what the neighbors have done. It's what this property has brought to you. And so you have to make that finding.
Right, and to what the neighbors have done, we're not evaluating theirs, and we've had situations come before the board where people had bought property sight unseen and things like that and didn't realize or didn't do their due diligence or claimed financial hardship because they planned to develop, and it was just not reasonable given the constraints that we have to work within. So we can't base the decision on what everyone else has done. We have to focus on the case present.
My concern is there any amount of information we can request that's going to give us the grounds to grant the structure variance? I mean, it's just kicking the can down the road, asking for more information if there's no possibility. So I think we do have to give some encouragement or discouragement at this point to the applicant. And like our chairman said, let's split out the components of this with the turf, the structure, and the permeable surfaces outside the structure, and approve or disapprove the likelihood of either event, because the information we're asking is costly.
And Commissioner Lewis, that was what I was, maybe I wasn't outright saying it, but that was what I was implying in my previous comments as well.
And before I recognize Ms. Hayes, to build on your point, that's part of my question about the permitted structure versus unpermitted. Is there do we have the absolute definition of what, if, recreational structures are permitted within the buffers, and does this qualify? And so we need a solid answer on that.
Right. I can point you to the Metro Code provision, but I don't think that there's going to be a solid answer. I mean, there's the language, what the language says, and I think I want to make something clear just so you guys can understand maybe a little bit about how we got here, is that first of all, you start from the fact that there should not be any construction there at all, right? And then there's exceptions. And one of the exceptions is athletic fields used for recreational purposes, including facilities associated with the recreational athletic fields, such as dugouts, bleachers, concession stands, storage buildings, and other similar structures. Does turf fall here? I guess, does a turf field fall here? Is that more intended for public recreation, which is how we've always interpreted it? When we see section F of that clause, we think of like the Bellevue soccer fields, right? We don't think of a guy puts it in his backyard kind of thing. And so this would not be before you, but for the fact that probably F needs to be looked at. My interpretation of that is, as I said, it's the plain language. There's nothing I can do to get you any further than that, because that's all the code has. I mean, that's your job to sort of adjudicate if it falls under that or if it doesn't fall under that. If you were to find that it falls under that, then I think you could start to talk. If you were to find that it doesn't fall under that, then I think it starts from a place of no. And I'm not sure how helpful that is, but that's
helpful. Yeah. Ms. Hayes, sorry to keep you waiting.
Kimberly Hayes, Metro Water Development Services, infill, also stormwater permitting. So our section reviews about 90% of the permits that are started with codes and zoning. I think we've discussed that the pool would have required a building permit, and the structure itself would have required a building permit. Whether or not it's considered an athletic structure at this point, that's not what we're leaning to. But if it's not, and it had come to our section for review, it is not something that we would have approved, just as has been stated, because it's in the floodway and it's not an appealable item. Any structures in the floodway, we would just say you can't appeal for it. So with that going forward, we just want to point that out.
So I will say the staff made a determination that it didn't fit section F, right?
That's right. That's right. Thank you for that, Ms.
Also, in regard to the pool, I'm not sure what prompted Mr. Paget asking Logan to come out. I mean, with pool permits during COVID, I mean, they increased by 500%, not 100%, 500% with pool permits. So I have no idea, some of the ones you've mentioned, those are not what's before us today, whether somebody did something without a permit. But if he was prompted for him to come out for the pool, why were we prompted to come out for the structure?
Thank you. We'd like to see you more often here at these meetings, Ms. Hayes. Thank you. Okay. All right, well, let's take it one at a time. Shall we handle the structure first? I think we have some consensus of the definition of a structure as it relates to the exclusions in our regulations.
I would move to deny the variance request as it relates to maintaining the structure in the flood zone and zone 1 buffer. And as a part of this motion, we are parsing out the various requests in the variance, is my assumption.
I want to ask legal if that's okay for us to do for this case, and having maybe 2 or 3 different motions.
I think you could do it that way. That's fine. Just make sure that you're clear. I see 3 bullet points on your agenda that you can consider. It says allowance of unpermitted structure to remain, allowances of disturbance into stream buffer, Bellmead branch to remain. I'm not sure what that is. Continuous mowing and maintenance. So they're asking for those 3 bullet points. I don't think there's an issue in breaking up your motion. Just make sure that you're clear and responsive to what they've put on your agenda.
And I'll just say too that, the uncompensated fill that's in the staff comments wasn't exactly addressed. So there's a potential that there was fill introduced in the floodplain that wasn't there before when they moved it from the basketball court to the turf area.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to mention that I think we would like to defer at the same time. I want to hear everything you all have to say, because like Mr. Lewis said, giving us direction is tremendously helpful. So I'm not standing in your way to stop your process, but I think we would like to defer hearing some of these things, and so just at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Well, no one has seconded my motion at this point, so it's, if no one does, then.
Is there a second, or if there's no second, then the motion fails?
I think we've heard the applicant request, but go ahead.
I'm not going to second because they're going to pursue more information for the turf, and so maybe it impacts the structure. I don't know, but they know that the direction is kind of heading, so I would just say defer everything, but that's why I'm not speaking up to second.
How about this? I will withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank you. I was about to go down the line.
I was going to say, I would like to see if they come up with some alternate plan to mitigate the structure, maybe relocate the structure on the property or something like that, or come up with an alternative structure our facility that's not in the flood zone.
I'll make a motion to defer with the opportunity for anybody else to make additional comments.
Great, we have a motion. Do we have a second to defer?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion or guidance? Do you feel like you have enough information from us to attempt to come back? Yeah.
I think it needs to be noted that if you do address the comments, that does not guarantee an approval.
Yeah, and I will double down on that with the concept of the hardship. I think you know this as well, so, okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? Great. Motion carries as a deferral. Thank you. All right. Hey, I'm open for a quick break. I think that was a case worthy of one. So I'd like to entertain a motion for a 5-minute break. So moved. Okay, it's non-negotiable. All right. We'll see everybody back in... And we have one remaining case on the agenda. And I would like the applicant to go ahead and come on up, and we'll get you started while Logan reads your rights. You guys were here earlier. Did you hear it before? You did? Okay, you're in good shape. Okay, well, great. So and you know how this goes down. I will let you go ahead and start.
I'll introduce, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Case number 2 on the agenda, case 2024-00001, Parkwood Baseball, preliminary, at 3017 Aldrich Lane. APN is 060000005700. Inspector, Logan Bowman. Council District 2, Keonsae Toombs. Applicant's request, disturbance of the stream buffer, allowance of impervious surfaces to remain within the buffer area, continuous mowing and maintenance of portions of the stream buffer, waiver of buffer signage is necessary, and multiple stream crossings within 1,000 feet. Appellant is Habitat for Humanity of Greater Nashville, represented by Corey Hall, P.E., Thomas and Hutton. Comments, Stormwater staff. If the preliminary variance is approved, staff requests that the applicant identifies the TDU requirement, if any, and that the applicant works with staff to vary the native species planting. Codes, no comment provided. Planning, defer to recommendation of the Stormwater Management Commission. Greenways, defer to recommendation of the Stormwater Management Commission.
Great. I will let you introduce yourselves, and then I'll start the 10-minute clock to hear your presentation.
I'm Corey Hall with Thomas and Hutton Engineering, and I have
Andrew Reed. I'm also with Thomas and Hutton. We're the civil engineer.
So we are representing the Habitat for Humanities of Greater Nashville. Unfortunately, they were unable to be here today. They're actually in D.C. Working at a conference for low-income housing. That is one of their goals. So unfortunately, they weren't able to be here, but they did kind of give me a little bit of a history of the park that they asked me to kind of read, kind of give you all the background of how this park came about and the importance of it to the community. So I'm going to kind of read through that real quick, and then I'll get through some of the technical part of why we're here to discuss. Parkwood's first baseball diamond was built and fielded its first team in 1966 on land that was owned by the Cumberland Sertoma Club, who purchased this piece of property from Fisk University. In 1973, longtime Metro firefighter Jerry Hell, who was a white male, became the first Dixie youth coach to coach a team of African Americans in the Dixie Youth League at Parkwood. The Parkwood Dixie team became the only African American franchise in Dixie Youth League. In 1984, the Cumberland Sertoma Club of Nashville was going to sell the property, and they gave the Parkwood baseball board 2 months to acquire the property or lose it. And in that process, they were able to come up with a $10,000 down payment and get financing to acquire that property to keep it under their control. At that time, the Parkwood Community Club, a nonprofit organization with a minority-led board, became the only known African-American owned and operated youth sports complex in Tennessee, and only one of 5 in the country. Parkwood thrived through the years. However, in 2002, participation started to decline due to the aging facilities and lack of maintenance and funds to maintain the fields and property. Participation in the Parkwood baseball and softball programs continued to be challenged through the COVID pandemic years. And at that time, Habitat's been involved with Parkwood for a better part of 14 years at this point. But Habitat really developed a relationship with the Parkwood community. By renting spaces while they built on that aerial, the parcels to the west of the park is actually a Habitat for Humanity community. So they were using the Parkwoods complex for some parking in an effort to rent that space as a means to help keep Parkwood afloat during that time. At that time, Habitat began discussions with the Parkwood board. The Parkwood Haynes Trinity Neighborhood Coalition, and under the leadership of District 2 Councilwoman Toombs, this discussion coalesced into a community effort led by the Habitat for Humanity to restore the ball fields, establish a 59-acre metro park which is going to be constructed to the south. Actually, to the east of the parcel is going to be the trailhead for parking and entrance into that park. And to continue their efforts to build affordable housing. The friendship with Habitat, who has been involved with the Parkwood community for the last, again, 14 years, they've led the fundraising for park construction, and they're taking this just strictly upon themselves. They're gaining nothing from it. They're just kind of taking ownership of the fundraising and the efforts to revitalize this park. They deeply believe in the transformative nature Parkwood has played and continues to play in the hundreds of lives of children who have grown up in this under-resourced neighborhood. Adjoining Parkwood, again, will be the 59-acre park that Habitat was involved with in organizing and getting that taken care of. And so they are grateful for the consideration of this project before the board today. And through Habitat's efforts, the Nashville Sounds have joined in the fundraising efforts. They have obtained a grant from Major League Baseball, who is going to be a huge contributor in the construction of this. And in the process, they are working with a private company who will be able to come in and run, operate, and maintain the facility post all this construction. So it's not just going to be all this money coming in, rebuilding the park, and then it's left in Parkwood's hands to make it work again. So there's long-term efforts to make this a feasible, long-term benefit to the community out there. And so going a little bit more into the technical side of this, the plan at this point is to the two smaller fields on the east will be turfed, infield, and natural grass in the outfields. The large field on the west, which is the home location for a local high school out there, that field will be entirely turfed. And in that process of making it a feasible park, we're needing to add some parking, which a significant portion is being added in that northwest corner away from the buffer. And our biggest needs there's a lot of existing areas of pavement that is within the buffer. Working with Logan and Ms. Doan, we came about of ways to eliminate some of the existing pavement within the buffer, just a little bit as a consensus and compromise. We're needing to widen the existing crossing there on the north side. Currently, it's 1 lane wide, and we're needing to be able to put feasible traffic, two-way traffic in that, and also in an effort to help mitigate some, we're going to be eliminating, there's a pedestrian crossing mid-site that we're going to eliminate and move that crossing to that northern road crossing with an adjacent sidewalk. I'm trying to think. And then our biggest mitigation effort is this property over the years from aerials, there is no buffer on this stream whatsoever through that whole site. And so you've probably seen our mitigation landscape plans that we're going to be enhancing that buffer with some significant landscaping to help compensate for where we do need to add some additional pavement, but also while we're also eliminating some of the existing pavement. And with that, I will turn it over to y'all.
Great. That's the end of your presentation.
Yes.
Okay. I'll close the presentation and open it up for public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor or opposition of? Seeing none, did we receive any letters or, as Chair Dodd would say, blimps or airmail?
I did receive some correspondence, just asking for information from Councilwoman Toombs. I also received an email from Mr. William Worrell, who's with the Nashville Tree Conservation Corps, and he said that there was previous work kind of done in this area to do on this park through the Nashville Tree Conservation Corps and also the other park that was mentioned that's going to be built. So they've been heavily involved in discussions with that. I also had a conversation this morning with David Withers, who's with TDAC, about the streamside salamander. He said he's been out to this site before and he has not seen the salamander, but he has seen the streamside salamander in portions close to this property. So when you if you do a QHP or have a QHP come out and look at it, make sure to have him involved to see if the salamander's actually present in this area.
Okay. Closing public hearing then, and opening up to the commissioners for discussion. This is for information only, correct?
Yes, at this point in time, I'll just add that habitat, because this is a big contingent portion of us being able to move into further design. Again, being a nonprofit, they didn't want to pay all the upfront costs for full engineering and it just get kicked back and they just have trouble moving forward. So they'd like to have more of a guidance, a little bit more preliminary. Yes, this looks feasible on our end for a final variance.
We appreciate that approach. Thank you.
You mentioned turf and grass. By turf, do you mean AstroTurf?
We were synthetic turf, yes.
Synthetic
It'll
turf.
have the gravel, subgrade, under drain systems, yes.
And do you have to mitigate the parking lot expansion? Is that asphalt or?
The parking lot expansion to the west, it is outside the stream buffer, so there's no mitigation with that.
I just meant, is it exempt from?
So we've talked with Courtney Larson, just as a kind of preliminary application. That's where we found out this was actually a stream that was regulated. But in those conversations, she had indicated the extent of these improvements would require us to comply with LID. And so that's our intent, would be for this site to be LID compliant, and that would include the expansion of the parking.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. The Habitat's initial approach was to try to stay under 10,000 square foot of improvements. One, to help move the project forward a lot quicker. But due to the feasibility of being able to make it a sustainable park afterwards, they've opted to go forward with the full improvements that are needed at this time and go through the whole stormwater permitting process.
Based on your preliminary site layout, do you have any calculations by square feet on what impervious surfaces are going to be removed and what will be added? I didn't see it on the initial plans, but didn't know if you had those calculations, just in the buffer, in the zone 1, zone 2 buffer.
I do not have that with me.
That would be helpful in the future.
Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful to have that information. With the artificial turf fields, are you all working with staff to ensure that design and that profile meets the pervious aspects of?
Yes, we've had discussions with them up to this point, and they've kind of, under the situation of the project, they're willing to take this under the consensus of its existing grass fields and almost consider it as a no change in imperviousness.
But yes, we will be exploring that as an LID option. And we'll be working closely with Courtney and other staff to make sure it's compliant.
A couple other questions I had. Seeing the plan and looking at your removal plan, the red and green one, it looks like there's a dumpster pad and a vacant pad just south of it that's not noted as being removed. I was just curious if that is intended to stay and if there is,
Yes, at this time, the intent is to maintain a dumpster pad. If we need to look at options to move it to an alternate location, we definitely can.
I think it would be a really great opportunity within the project to remove, a dumpster pad that has the ability to leak things and whatever else out and remove some impervious surface. I think that would be a win. And then you have a landscape architect on the board now, so I've got some landscape-related items. One thing that I think would be helpful to see and understand, obviously the sanitary sewer easement is noted in your plans, and I didn't know what was happening within it. I know, there's no trees and those sorts of things being planted within it, but an opportunity to establish a buffer through native grasses or a native grass mix of grasses and perennials and those sorts of things. Is that the intent within that space, within the buffers? It just wasn't really labeled as one or the other, and I guess I was just curious what was happening within it. for what the plan is?
I was, at this time, I think the directive to the landscape architect was more of stay out of the easement, but putting in a native grass type growth within that, as it is part of the buffer, is something we can definitely consider for sure.
Okay. And then I would also just encourage you to consider where you are kind of showing your mix of your native grass, of the panicum. Obviously diversity is a really great thing when it comes to just resiliency and along a stream buffer and just in terms of creating the beneficial habitat. So I would just encourage, as you develop it, to look at diversity and look at kind of the opportunities within that.
Sorry, Mr. Lindsay. I'd like to recognize you to chime in here.
Not a problem. Roger Lindsay, I'm the Section Chief of Stormwater Master Planning and serve as the Floodplain Administrator for Nashville. And I noticed as I look at the mapping for this site that it's not a modeled and mapped stream segment, but it certainly is a tributary, perhaps a significant tributary to Ewing Creek, which is a creek that we've dealt with significant flooding issues, certainly in 2010, but even prior to 2010, Ewing Creek can significantly flood. I appreciate that it was determined to be a stream, and that I guess Courtney has identified the buffer requirements for that. And I would suggest that you simply treat that as such, that you respect those buffers, you conform to our requirements for those buffers, because what we're doing county-wide right now is that we continue to work with the Corps of Engineers to, one, upgrade our models and maps, and two, to model and map additional tributaries that have never been modeled and mapped before. And we're doing a lot of those now. We have 18 new map panels that we will roll out and hopefully adopt in about June or July of this year. And they represent a number of tributaries. There are a number of tributaries, for example, to 7 Mile Creek, Brentwood Branch and Bandywood Branch and some other little segments that have never been mapped as mapped floodplain and floodway. They don't have map designated floodway and floodplain shown on them. So, that could potentially happen, 3 to 5 years down the road as we continue to work on our maps. So it just struck me that this was probably just another case of a tributary that is a real creek, but that is not, it wouldn't show up as part of a FEMA flood map. So,
Thank you for that. It also struck me that, as you all are representing a nonprofit, this site could be a great candidate for some nonprofit collaboration with Cumberland River Compact and their compensatory mitigation program. I know we're asking for some additional mitigation within the buffer, and to build on what Mr. Lindsay had talked about, we'd like to enhance this as we have the opportunity to, and this could be a good candidate for that with Cumberland River Compact's collaboration.
I think what he means by that is we're always trying to find opportunities for other people to fix streams.
Yeah.
And so I don't know legally if we can put an easement to the benefit of Cumberland, somebody within the buffer that wouldn't impact them, but maybe somebody time in the future, if somebody else needed a mitigation opportunity, they could come in here and, repair the stream bed. Overall, this is a great community asset. You got to have two-way traffic for fire protection, emergency services, keeping people's anger down, being able to get out. But it'd be great. Exactly, it'd be great to have the square footage breakdown. But in general, I feel like this is a very benign application, and no big showstoppers that I see.
The one thing I would say, I know that they're asking for a waiver of buffer signage, but educational signage, this might be a great opportunity to have some educational signage about the buffer. So if you wouldn't mind maybe proposing something, or if any of my commissioners had any thoughts on that when you bring, since this is a preliminary, you come back before us.
I think that's a great idea, and maybe some sort of kiosk about, the plantings and why, there is diversity and, what the importance of the stream is to the community, and those things could be really cool as an opportunity. And that might be something that the compact would be willing to help contribute to also. But I think, like Mr. Fulmer said, this seems pretty benign. It looks like you all are putting forth, a real good faith effort to, work within the low impact development regulations and provide benefit to the community for the space.
Okay. Any additional comments? All right. Well, since this is a preliminary, there's no action needed from us.
No. I guess we've typically given like conditions listed in the meeting minutes, but if anybody has specific conditions.
Historically, we have been voting on them, haven't we?
I think we've
As
still
a part, and then
voted.
putting, I feel like we have over the last
Yeah.
few meetings that I've been in when we've had a handful of preliminaries.
I think you've still voted on it, but we haven't written a decision yet.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, it matters. I apologize. I didn't mean to diminish your role. It's just that it's non-binding because you're providing guidance. You're not giving them, a hard rule as to what they have to do or what they must do or, a decision. So however you guys want to play it.
I guess one question for the applicants, is there anything specific you need from us since this is a preliminary beyond the commentary that's been provided?
Honestly, from the Habitat's perspective, it was more of feedback. Was it going to be straightforward negativity that was going to be hard to overcome, or receptiveness of what we've presented? Again, we didn't want to get to a point with nonprofit contributions to a point where we're at a standstill trying to come to some sort of an agreement of a design and mitigation efforts that could ultimately be a point that they lose their feasibility to construct it. I know some massive projects can get real costly in mitigation. And so, and that was something we made Habitat aware front end. We're like, mitigation is going to cost some money. There's going to have to be some landscaping. We will try not to just go extremely overboard with it, but we're going to be very conscious of nonprofit contributed money from, again, some pretty high organizations with Major League Baseball and the Sounds, but also trying to be in compliance with regulations.
We appreciate the comment about the Cumberland Compact and similar groups that would be willing to support, because I think, or obviously it's Habitat for Humanity, they want to do the right thing for the community. And so by no means are they trying to skirt around any requirements or ask for any exemption by that means. But improving the buffer is definitely something they would be interested in, especially if they could get additional contributions from others, because that's how they've raised all of their funds for this, is by contributions. And so I do truly appreciate that for our client.
I think the only hairy part on the application is the enlarged driveway servicing, the one handicap space back by the dumpster pad that'll be removed, just because it's hard to say what the hardship is for that. But given the community benefit of the athletic fields, we typically are a little more lenient in that. And since the majority of it already exists, and what you're removing from the zone one, I think that's acceptable. The other widening, maybe not require a variance just because it's a crossing. But in general, I just wanted to say that because if this were a retail building or something, then it'd be looked at differently.
I think the variance there was they have two within 1,000 feet, so maybe the other one's on a different.
That is correct. The road crossing to the north was just under 1,000 feet. So I believe that's why that was included.
But this is the only crossing on this parcel.
Yeah. And I'll note, with the improvement of that widening, we're going to be replacing the storm culverts under that driveway. Right now, they are old corrugated metal. I told Habitat at this point, if we're widening, you're best to improve it at this point. Make sure we have capacity and no upstream blockages. Because There is no buffer. The stream itself does have a lot of overgrowth, which does then accumulate at the existing culvert. So I've made them aware that it's going to cost a little bit, but we do need to improve that culvert crossing as we're widening that path.
All right. You feel like you have enough feedback from the commission to make your final application? All right, great. We'll go without making a motion with the bullet points this time, unless you refer back to the tape. Okay.
Thank you all for your time.
Very good.
Yes, thank you.
All right, with that, Logan, is there any other business that we have for today's meeting?
Next month, we're scheduled to be back at the school board because this room is busy. We could also go back to Lindsley Hall if they're available. I guess I wanted to get everybody's feedback as to where you prefer to meet. School board's kind of hard to get to, and it doesn't work well for Rebecca, for sure. So we had that room at Lindsley Hall that's like the big conference room where we met in September.
How many cases are you anticipating?
3 or 4.
Yeah, that was the problem last time, was just queuing of applicants.
We had, yeah,
outside.
that was the hard part about that room, but it did work out pretty well, I figure.
Any strong preference? I think it's helpful to have the audience there in the room.
Okay.
Yeah, it's less gymnastics, but whichever way staff feels it's easier on them. I wouldn't want to create any additional burden.
Okay. I think after March, we'll be back in here for a little bit, you know. We're usually not in this room in February either, but.
And then at some point, not to change subjects abruptly, but I would like to continue our conversation that we had with the panel about the compensatory mitigation collaboration opportunities and what are the next steps with that. There was mention that Metro Legal is currently, Tom Cross is reviewing some of those pieces with TDEC potentially. It'd be nice to have an update of maybe where that is and where it intends to land and how we can continue to refine that collaboration interdepartmentally with Metro. So.
Okay. And I think March or April, we've talked to planning about giving us an update on the stormwater study that's been done.
Yes.
Yeah, Nathan was involved, I believe. Kimley Horn was involved in that. They did give a presentation to some council members. You can find that on the Metro website, and I can send that out as well about that study. And then we should be getting a follow-up presentation by planning as well on that.
Yeah, I missed the notice for that presentation. It was good. I caught the tail end of it, but it'd be nice if you all know of some of those pieces that are going through council or through planning that have any impact in our world at Stormwater, that we received notice of those presentations so we can be equally informed with council and planning and other departments. So that might have just been a one-off, but.
And also now that we're, every member's been replaced, after Dawn, I think it would be good to do ethics training or something like that with Ms. Ladd and whatever other trainings we want to do on regulations.
What are you saying?
I'm just saying Ms. Costonis did one years ago. I don't know how long ago that was, if anybody was even on the board that's on the board now. And we had an ethics training, but I think it's probably a good thing for every board and commission to have some sort of ethics training. So.
Yeah. We do need to go ahead and schedule that, especially since we have new members. I think that there's I don't think it's a yearly requirement, but do you know, Rebecca? Is it yearly?
I thought it was, but I don't know where I'm getting that from. And I should also note, we did have a buffer presentation. I have no concept of time, maybe 3 years ago. So it might be time to do that again.
Yeah, I don't know when's the last time you had your ethics presentation, but I feel confident that you're due one. So Logan, could you please add that? And it's really not very long. It's me going over the Metro Code provisions, what you can and can't do. I mean, it's only going to add probably 20 minutes to your agenda, and unless you ask a lot of questions, then it goes as long as it goes. But for my portion of it, it's relatively quicker.
And to give maybe people watching, we did go through training when we joined the board, but there may be members who have been on longer than a year now. So people know that we have had training before we joined.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. I've been on 2 years. You've been on longer. I guess I'm the other than Mr. Lewis.
I think we joined.
We joined
About the
close
same
to
time.
the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been about 2 years, and I don't think we've had one since we started.
I think I was January of 22.
Was like October or something in 21. I was fall of 21.
Yeah, so you're due for your booster shot. You're definitely due for your booster shot. So Logan and I will work together to get that put on the agenda. And the only thing I will say is that everyone does need to attend. And if you don't, then you have to meet that requirement, then you and I would have to meet separately and go through it. So when you see it on the agenda, endeavor to attend if you can.
All right, can we avoid after school breaks for those?
I was gonna say, I'm gonna be on maternity leave April and May.
All right.
It wasn't supposed to be a big announcement, I'm just saying, please, like, I don't wanna have to meet with her separately and then go through this.
This is a worldwide announcement.
Yeah, right. But again, if that's what it needs to happen, I'll be unavailable those 2 months.
Great.
Or I could just come, I guess. I don't know. I've never had a baby before, so I don't know, like, what's gonna be required.
Don't agree to come.
It's a great
It is,
excuse.
on the latter end.
Right.
Not the early end.
Wow. Well, any other business? That was.
No, well, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna apologize for being regularly late. Until we can fix traffic, on Ellington Parkway, I will probably be late to the meetings.
All right.
Because of school drop off and then getting through.
It's just the season. Well, Commissioner Oliver, would you like to introduce a motion to close us out?
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Seconded, all in favor? Aye. Very good.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.